Have you ever felt alone, abandoned in the midst of pain, while others disappeared just when you needed them the most? Imagine being in that moment and choosing to stay. This is the story of John, the only apostle who didn't run away. The only one who stood at the foot of the cross, while all the others fled. Why did he stay? What made him different? And how did a fiery young man become the apostle of love? If you're looking for strength to remain firm in the middle of the storm, this story may speak directly to your soul. Let's journey through John's life, from a simple fisherman to an eyewitness of the resurrection and the author of the most profound gospel in the New Testament. Because his story could change how you understand love, faith, and true loyalty. It was a dark time. The people of Israel lived under the oppressive rule of the Roman Empire. Streets were patrolled by foreign soldiers, taxes were high, and the hearts of the people beat between hope and despair. Many clung to ancient prophecies about a coming Messiah. Others simply survived. In the midst of this world, worn out by politics, rigid religion, and social injustice, John, the son of Zebedee, was born. John wasn't raised in temples or taught by rabbis. He wasn't part of Jerusalem's religious elite. He was a Galilean, from a fishing family. His life revolved around the sea, the nets, and hard work under the sun. At first glance, he was an ordinary young man, with no heroic ambitions or divine promises. But as we already know, God doesn't see as men see. And in that seemingly ordinary young man, Jesus saw something extraordinary. The region of Galilee, where John grew up, was far from the religious center of Jerusalem. To some, it was a spiritually lesser region, full of farmers and fishermen. But it was precisely there that Jesus chose to begin his ministry. Coincidence? Hard to believe. Perhaps because humble hearts have more room for the divine. Since childhood, John would have heard about the God of Abraham, Moses, and Elijah. But he also would have felt the painful distance between those glorious stories and his people's harsh reality. Interestingly, before following Jesus, John was a disciple of John the Baptist. That tells us something crucial. John was spiritually thirsty. He wasn't just a hard-working boy, he was a seeker. Something inside him was not satisfied with routine. Something told him there had to be more, that those old promises weren't just bedtime stories. Have you ever felt that? That your life is fine, but incomplete? That there's a voice calling you towards something greater, even if you don't know what it is yet? And so, in a world filled with empty religion and corrupt systems, a young man with a restless heart was unknowingly being prepared to meet the Son of God. It wasn't chance, it was purpose. Because John's path and Jesus' path were meant to cross. That moment came. One ordinary day, walking near the Jordan River, John heard John the Baptist point to a man and say, "Behold the Lamb of God." No one else seemed to stop. But John did. He was already a disciple of the Baptist, which shows us again, he had spiritual hunger. And when he heard those words, his heart leaped. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't calculate. He simply followed Jesus. Alongside Andrew, he walked behind the Master. Jesus turned around, looked at them, and asked, "What are you seeking?" They replied, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" Jesus didn't question them. He simply said, "Come and see." It was more than an invitation. It was the beginning of a transformation. That first encounter didn't come with miracles or heavenly lights. It was simple, human, intimate. And that teaches us something powerful. God often reveals himself in the ordinary. In a comment, in a conversation, in a silence. And if your heart is awake, you feel it. John felt it. From that day on, everything changed. John left his net, his boat, his former life. he traded stability for uncertainty, routine for adventure. But not just any adventure. One that would lead him to see the dead raised, the blind see, storms calmed. And most of all, it would lead him to understand love like never before. Following Jesus wasn't like attending a school. There were no diplomas, no written exams, no fixed schedules. Discipleship meant shared life. Walking together. Breaking bread together. Listening, observing, and being transformed, not just by what Jesus said, but by how he lived. John accepted that kind of discipleship. And in time, he wasn't just another follower, he became one of Jesus' inner three. Alongside Peter and his brother James, John witnessed moments no one else did. The resurrection of Jairus' daughter, the glory on the Mount of Transfiguration, the agony in Gethsemane. That closeness was no accident. Jesus knew each disciple's heart. And in John, he saw something special. A sensitive spirit, able to perceive not just the words, but the heartbeat of heaven. That's why he brought him to places only prepared hearts could handle. John wasn't the bravest, nor the wisest. He was young. He had a strong personality. Jesus even nicknamed him and his brother Sons of Thunder. He likely had outbursts, youthful pride, a fire that sometimes burned too bright. But he had something more valuable. A willingness to learn. To draw near. To listen. That intimacy changed how he saw the world. It was no longer about catching fish, but souls. No longer about quick justice, but compassion. He was no longer the son of thunder, but the disciple of love. The day Jesus was arrested, everything changed. The air turned heavy. The disciples vanished. Peter denied him. Thomas hid. Everyone ran, except one. John didn't run. He didn't shout. He didn't try to be a hero. He just stayed. Silent. With a broken heart. But firm. When Jesus was taken to Golgotha, carrying his cross, John was there. When the nails pierced his hands, John was there. When the sky went dark and the Son of God took his final breath, John was still there. Can you imagine what that meant? To watch the one you loved most suffer like that, and be unable to do anything. Just watch. Just cry. Just remain. And in that staying, John's true faithfulness was revealed. He didn't need to speak. His presence spoke louder than 1,000 sermons. And in the middle of that unbearable pain, something sacred happened. Jesus, hanging on the cross, saw his mother, and saw John. And he said to Mary, "Woman, behold your son." Then to John, "Behold your mother." It was a handoff. A gesture of trust. In his final breath, Jesus entrusted John with what was most precious to him, his own mother. While others ran, John received a mission. Not because he was the strongest, but because he was the most faithful. Faithfulness carries a weight that talent can never match. And in that moment, John went from disciple to guardian of the eternal. We all face our own crosses, moments of injustice, betrayal, loss, and silence from God. And in those moments, many walk away. But those who remain, make the difference. Faithfulness is not perfection. It's not having all the answers. It is simply not abandoning. And that, in these times, is already a miracle. It's curious how some people are known for what they do, and others, for who they become. In the early days, Jesus nicknamed John and his brother James Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. Why that name? Because they were intense, temperamental, perhaps even impatient. Once, when a Samaritan village refused to receive Jesus, the brothers suggested something radical. "Do you want us to call down fire from heaven to destroy them?" Fire from heaven. Subtle, they were not. But Jesus didn't come to destroy villages, he came to save hearts. And over time, that same impulsive John was transformed, slowly, deeply, lovingly. He went from impulsive reaction to compassion, from judgment to service, from thunder to whisper. You know what's beautiful about that transformation? It was an instant. There wasn't one miracle that changed everything at once. It was the constant nearness to Jesus. It was seeing how he treated the outcasts, how he forgave traitors, how he loved unconditionally. John absorbed that way of life. And what once was destructive fire became guiding light. That is hope for all of us. Many believe they must change before drawing near to God. But John shows us the opposite. It is by drawing near that we are changed. God doesn't demand perfection to begin, just a willingness to stay. Over time, John was not only recognized as an apostle, but as the beloved disciple. Not because Jesus loved him more, but because John understood that love the best. He was the one who leaned on the Master's chest at the Last Supper. He was the one who didn't run from the cross. He was the one who, more than grasping the theology of the kingdom, captured the heart of the king. His transformation was so deep that when we read his writings, the gospel, his letters, the revelation, we notice something unique. They are not filled with debates, data, or lists. They are filled with love. Phrases like, God is love, whoever does not love has not known God, little children, let us love one another. That was the transformed John. And now think of yourself. Maybe you too have a spark that sometimes turns into wildfire. Maybe there are words you speak and then regret. Reactions that you don't even recognize. But if John was transformed, so can you be. And not by your strength, but by the constant presence of the one who turns thunder into tenderness. God is not looking for perfect people. He is looking for willing hearts. And love does the rest. The silence of the tomb was broken by a dawn that changed history. Jesus rose. Death, which seemed to have won, was defeated. And among the first to witness this victory was John. He ran to the tomb with Peter, saw the empty linens, and believed. That moment marked a turning point. It was no longer about following a teacher walking through Galilee. It was about proclaiming the risen Christ. And John, who had remained at the foot of the cross, was also one of the first to carry the message of the gospel with unwavering faith into a world that didn't understand what had just happened. Though in the book of Acts John doesn't appear as prominently as Peter or Paul, his presence is constant. With Peter, he healed the crippled man begging at the temple gate. He was arrested, interrogated, beaten. But he didn't stop. His faith was firm. His conviction, unshakable. Yet his mission was not only public. John was also a man of writing, of depth, of reflection. While other gospel writers recorded Jesus' life with chronological precision, John wrote from the heart, guided by experience and love. His gospel is unique. It begins not with Jesus' birth, but with, in the beginning was the Word. It takes us to the essence, the invisible, the eternal. Throughout his gospel, John doesn't just report miracles. He reveals the soul of Jesus. He gives us intimate conversations like those with Nicodemus, the Samaritan woman, and the moving moment of the foot washing. Every word is filled with closeness, tenderness, reverence. He also wrote 3 letters that circulated among the early Christian communities. In them, he doesn't seek to debate or impose, but to remind them of what matters most. Whoever loves is born of God. God is love. Little children, let us not love in word only, but in deed and truth. In a time when divisions were already beginning, John called for unity through love. And let us not forget one very special mission. From the cross, Jesus entrusted his mother to John. "Behold your son, behold your mother." John took her into his home and cared for her like a true son. Can you imagine the conversations between John and Mary? Two people who knew Jesus like no one else. Sharing memories, tears, silences, and hope. John's mission after the resurrection was quiet, but powerful. He didn't need fame or titles. His impact wasn't measured in crowds but in depth. And that depth still touches hearts today. Maybe your mission also seems small in the world's eyes. But if it's full of love, truth, and faithfulness, then it is eternal. After decades of faithful service, tender preaching, and soul-filled writing, John entered a new chapter in his life: solitude. Not ordinary solitude, but exile. Because of his faith, he was sent to a barren, rocky island called Patmos. There were no crowds, no churches, no family. Only silence, stones, and sky. Many would think it was the end. That the elderly apostle would be forgotten, swallowed by time and distance. But no, Patmos wasn't his tomb. It was his altar. Because in that isolated place, the heavens opened. And John received one of the most extraordinary revelations in all of Scripture, the book of Revelation. It wasn't a gentle vision. It was intense, symbolic, full of images that shake the soul. Angels, trumpets, beasts, thrones, judgments, fire, songs. And at the center of it all, the Lamb. John didn't just see the future of the world. He saw the ultimate victory of Christ over all evil. And he wrote it with power, reverent fear, and a clarity only those who have walked closely with God can have. But before revealing the end, Revelation shows us the present. John writes letters to 7 churches. Some strong, some lukewarm, some on the verge of spiritual death. To each one, Jesus speaks. He reminds them who he is. He confronts. He encourages. He gives hope. That teaches us something profound. Even when the world seems to be falling apart, God is still speaking to his church. Even when you feel alone on an island, exiled, forgotten, he has not abandoned you. The image of John on Patmos is powerful. An elderly man, weary, but with eyes open to the eternal. He did not lose his faith because he was isolated. On the contrary, it was precisely in that secluded place that he saw God's glory more clearly. And that may be a word for you. Maybe you're walking through your own Patmos. Moments where no one understands you. Where your voice seems to carry no weight. Where what you loved was taken from you. But there, in that dry place, the deepest revelation of your life may come. If John saw the glorious Lamb in his solitude, why couldn't you? Revelation is not just a book about catastrophe. It is a song of hope. It is a promise: behold, I am coming soon. It is an invitation to endure, to remain firm, to remember that in the end, the Lamb wins. And John, the same man once called a son of thunder, now becomes the prophet of comfort, messenger of eternity, witness to the glory to come. It wasn't in the temple. It wasn't in a crowded square. It was in Patmos, in solitude, that God showed him the end of the story and entrusted him with the most urgent and hope-filled message of all time. Throughout his life, John experienced things few could ever imagine. He witnessed miracles, walked with the Son of God, stood at the foot of the cross, saw the empty tomb, cared for Jesus' mother, wrote eternal words, and saw heaven open from a lonely island. But beyond everything he lived, what was truly etched into his soul was love. The love of Christ. The love that transforms, that remains, that restores. That love marked his life so deeply, it came to define him. He didn't call himself John the Apostle or John the Visionary, but simply the beloved disciple. And that wasn't arrogance. It was identity. John didn't boast in what he knew, but in whom he belonged to. He knew his worth didn't come from what he did, but from the love that held him. From his writings flow lessons that still shake the soul today. For example, God is love. 3 simple words, yet they contain an ocean. God doesn't just have love, He is love. It's His essence, His nature, His way of acting. Everything He does, even what we don't understand, is infused with love. Another unforgettable phrase. This is how God showed His love among us. He sent His one and only Son into the world that we might live through Him. John wasn't speaking of theories. He was speaking of a love with scars, a crucified love, a love that changed everything. He also taught something profoundly countercultural. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. Direct. No sugarcoating. Because for John, love for God is proven by how we treat others. It's not about religiosity, it's about relationship. Not about speeches, but actions. And perhaps his most tender lesson comes in his letters, when he writes, "Little children, let us love one another." He doesn't write as a commander. He writes as a spiritual father. One who has seen much, suffered much, and loved deeply. His words don't weigh heavy, they gently embrace. Through John we learn that faithfulness is measured over time. That intimacy with God transforms character. That pain doesn't cancel purpose. And that love is not a feeling, it's a daily decision, a commitment, a way of life. In a world obsessed with power, success, and recognition, John reminds us that the only thing that lasts is love. That greatness in the kingdom of heaven isn't about rising, but about bowing, serving, staying at the foot of the cross, and never stopping loving. That is his legacy. And it's within reach for all of us. You don't need to be perfect, eloquent, or strong. You only need to open your heart, walk closely with Jesus, and let yourself be loved. John's story isn't just the story of an apostle. It's the story of a transformation. Of an impulsive young man who once wanted to call fire from heaven, to a wise old man who spoke of love as someone who had seen it face to face. It's the story of someone who didn't run when everyone else did, who didn't deny when others did, who didn't seek the spotlight, but ended up leaving an eternal mark. Because while others chased power, he chose to remain. And in his remaining, he found his purpose. John wasn't perfect. He had a temper, made mistakes, had doubts. But he had something many don't. A heart sensitive to God's voice. And that was enough for Jesus to draw him closer. To entrust him with his mother, his vision of the future, and his message of love. Today, as we walk through his life, we're not just looking at the past. We're looking in a mirror. Because John's story can also be yours. Maybe you too have been marked by impulsiveness, fear, insecurity. Maybe you walked away. Or maybe you're in the middle of your own personal Patmos. Isolated, tired, without answers. But remember this. Those who remain are the ones who receive the deepest revelations. Not the strongest. Not the fastest. Those who remain. And you can be one of them. It doesn't matter if you come from a boat in Galilee or from an office in the city. It doesn't matter if your story is marked by mistakes or silence. Jesus is still saying the same words, "Come and see." And if you choose to walk with him, your story can also become a living testimony. So, love. Remain. Don't run. Don't repay evil with evil. Don't grow weary in doing good. Hold in your heart what John held in his. That everything worth living for is born from love. And only love remains. Because in the end, when the lights fade and the voices fall silent, it won't be success, applause, or recognition that remains. Only one question. Did you love like John loved? Did you remain like John remained? And if your answer is yes, then you can be sure you lived as a true beloved disciple. If this message touched your heart, if John's story awakened something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs strength to remain firm in the storm. And subscribe to the channel for more content that feeds the soul and strengthens the faith. And if you haven't seen it yet, I invite you to go watch the previous video. The powerful story of Caleb, the warrior who never lost faith. Because just as John teaches us to remain, Caleb teaches us to conquer, even when everyone else doubts. 2 men, 2 paths, 1 truth. When you walk with God, you are never alone. See you in the next video. Peace and purpose for your life.